Well, Colby, I appreciate you spending time with me. And I just finished your book, Shift.
Oh, good, because I would have waited if you wanted to finish it real quick.
What's yeah.
But
Yeah.
you're done, so
One
good.
chapter I have to finish. Let me.
Go ahead. Go on. I'll wait.
Yeah. And then, of course, this great book. But here's what I love about the book, Shift. I go, when I was reading this, I go, man, Colby is covering everything here. Almost, I wish I had this book 10 years ago, but I love it. You kind of cover faith, trust, and certainty. You have this great chapter on tools for surviving a faith shift, which is great. And then you don't shy away from the biggies. You go after who is God, who is Jesus, what is the Bible.
I don't know if I should have done it, but yes, I did.
Yes. And I'm going, oh my gosh, and the book's not even half done.
Yeah.
And you go after the big ones, which of course, in evolving Christianity, those are the biggies. But what I love is you hit all of those biggies. It's you inevitably circle back to how this affects us relationally, our relationship with God, our relationship with others, and how that even impacts our relationship with ourselves and our esteem and our worth. And I just go, wow, he covered it. It's funny. I found myself laughing. And I told you this earlier. What I loved about the humor of the book, the topic is always serious, but I think it gives a great example of, hey, we can laugh. I wish I laughed more when I was when I was a conservative Christian. I wish I laughed more. But even when I was going through my deconstruction, did you laugh a lot when you were going through your?
I'm laughing at the thought of, did I laugh? That's so meta. Yes. Okay. So first of all, thank you for having me. This was really good. It's great to be with you, Pastor David. Do you go by David or Dave or Dave?
David. Yeah. I've never been a Dave.
No, I respect that.
And I don't go by Pastor. Yeah. Just David. Yeah. David.
All right. Lord David is what we've landed on. Okay, good.
Oh, David. David is good.
And the rest of the Sparrow Day community, hi. So good to be with you. I'm out here in San Diego, and I hear that they called Nashville the San Diego of the middle of the country. So yeah, so well done.
Is that right? I've never heard that.
I made that up on the spot.
Okay.
It's just, they're both good cities.
I love yours. Yes.
Did I laugh much? So I had different iterations of this extraction from the evangelical heritage from which I grew up. Different moments, I think, that I can look back and kind of define. Oh yeah, that's when that tentacle got pulled off. That's when that chain got broken. That's when that door, which was always unlocked from the inside, I finally realized, I could just push the gate on. And I remember these moments of discovering this lightness, because that's kind of what you're noticing. That's kind of what you're naming, right? Is this sense of not taking ourselves too seriously. I take what I do very seriously, and by what I do, I mean helping people to find wholeness and healing and liberation, whether it's through disentangling bad theological ideas or helping normalize, like I did with the shift, normalize. Yeah, this experience is really freaking hard. It's not hard because you're doing it wrong. It's just really hard. So take some comfort in that. So I take what I do very seriously, but I try to take myself not all that. I try to take a lightness to it. And I'm with you. I don't know that was always the case back in our really rooted evangelical selves. David, I'm sure you were the same way. There was just a very I have to be right all the time, which is a super heavy weight to bear. And I have to project to the world this confidence, this certainty, which also is super heavy. So yeah, the idea of laughter and lightness felt sort of almost antithetical to those goals.
Right. Before, I don't know if anybody knows this, but when I graduated from high school, I was voted class clown. So there was a time when I was funny.
I didn't know that, so that's news to me.
Right. You didn't know that. How would you? And, but I've had people come up to me over the years who've known me. They go, David, what happened to you?
What happened?
You used to be so funny.
Painful.
Well, this book.
It's not too late, buddy. It's not too late.
That's right.
Circle back around to it.
Yes. Like I said, your book Shift. I wish I had this book 10 years ago. When I went through my process 10 years ago, you probably 10 plus years ago, the only book I really remember was Brian McLaren's A New Kind of Christian. He hadn't even written A New Kind of Christianity. Rachel Held Evans was writing a blog. There wasn't much. We all read Love Wins, but we were told we weren't supposed to.
Yeah.
So
I was told not to write about it. I was told by my pastor at the time, because I had been blogging and doing different things. He's like, I need nobody on the staff talk about reading Love Wins. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, and I go, and I'd watch those Numa films with Rob. And
yeah, can I tell you what I did? I was a bit of a so that was like 2010, 2011 when Love Wins came out.
Yeah.
And that was right around the time where I was like, I had now for at least like 3 or 4 years at that point just felt like I am in the wrong place. My internal world is not matching my external world. This is getting real uncomfortable. And so then when Love Wins came out and my pastor / boss said, don't tell people you're reading that or don't write about that. What I did to get around that, because I was a little bit of I was a little bit of a troublemaker. Not always intentionally so, but I was just like this overinflated balloon that had to have these release valves. So one of my release valves, because do you remember Francis Chan did like a reactionary book to Love Wins called Erasing Hell?
Oh, I read it. Yes.
Remember that?
Yes.
Then I did in my own, like, sort of, this will be a fun idea. I wrote an interview. Oh, what was the premise was like an interview with Satan where the book was Erasing Love, Hell Wins. Title of his book was Erasing Love, Hell Wins. And I did like this faux interview with Satan. And that was kind of my nod and my wink to, I'm still going to write about Love Wins without actually talking about Love Wins.
What was it? Was it those early days of blogging? Is that what it was?
Yeah. It's on a WordPress somewhere out there.
Did you get called into your senior pastor's office?
Not for that one. For many others.
Other things. Yes. Yeah.
Anyway,
well,
sorry for the tangent.
So you and I didn't have a book like this.
That's right.
So tell me about Shift. Why did you write the book?
Yeah, I wrote it because I had been noticing these common trends over the last 6-8 years as I've been ministering in this space with people who I identify as progressive Christian. They may or may not take that term for themselves, but the point is over the last, half a decade or whatever, I've been interacting with and meeting and helping people go through this process of either having left conservative Christianity or being kicked out of, which is the case for many people, and finding themselves on a journey towards something that, I don't know, is more open, inclusive, progressive, and still has this tether to Christianity in some way. And what I found is that journey, that experience, there's a lot of commonalities that show up for people. Like even though everybody's experience is unique, also there's some universal experiences in that. And so what I noticed is that if there's any way that I could write, the original concept for the book was a survival guide for becoming a progressive Christian. And so why did I write the book? I wrote the book, I said it a minute ago, to try to normalize for people, first of all, that, the fact that you feel lonely isn't because you're doing it wrong. It's just, this is a lonely journey. The fact that you are struggling with a lot of anger and resentment towards your previous maybe family of origin or previous church community, that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It's just, that makes a lot of sense. Of course you would be resentful and bitter and angry. The fact that you are constantly sort of feeling at war with yourself because there's part of you that really wants to maybe get curious and go down these paths and ask these questions and maybe toy around with some of these new spiritual practices. And yet there's this old part of you that immediately comes online, says, no, you can't. That's scary. That threatens your standing with God. Like those sort of, what I noticed is that we were all in our own ways experiencing versions of that. And if there's any way that I could help normalize it for people and then help them have a little bit of, here's something that might help when that comes. Yeah. When you come to that obstacle, which you're going to face if you haven't yet, this might help you get through it in a way where you're maybe less burned on the other side. So I think that's kind of why I wrote it, to normalize this journey and to help people with a little bit of some handholds as they go through it.
Yeah, and Colby, maybe you sort of answered this, but you've obviously gone through your own shift as a pastor, especially on the early. You were really part of the early days of this really being happening publicly. So you've talked to tons of people who have gone through their shift. What do you hope the book does for somebody who's going through a shift and they pick this up? And maybe it was in the answer you already gave. What is it you hope they experience in reading the book?
Yeah.
Or how the book walks alongside of them?
Yeah. I hope that readers feel a couple things. I hope, one, they feel less alone, because there is a painful loss of community when we go through the shift. And I know we live in a super connected world with social media, even though it's a type of connection, which is not nothing, but it's also a weird sort of connection. So I know people can find groups online and Facebook groups, and that's helpful. But I hope that people feel a little less alone, just to be like, oh yeah, there are other people that have gone through this shift or going through it at the same time. And like I said a minute ago, you're not doing it wrong. It's just, this is how this unfolds. And I hope I give them some permission to keep going, to not bail. And if they need to bail, that's fine. By the way, if anybody needs to, if they start going down this path towards what I call progressive Christianity, and it just gets too scary, too hard, too fast, and they need to hit pause, or they may even need to retreat a little bit. Like, look, I have looked at my life and the trajectory that I've gone on, and I have just come to the conclusion that I had very little to do with it. I had at some point along the way, I just throw my hands up and be like, grace, I don't know. Yeah. Spirit was with me, was ahead of me, calling me forward, was behind me, pushing me ahead. I don't understand my journey. So why would I presume that someone else's journey, like I would have any sort of say over or influence over? So if they need to go backward, that's fine. But permission to keep going if you want. And then I think also just this sort of pastoral hug, like, it's okay. It's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel scared. It's okay to feel all the things that you're feeling. And this is some of the stuff that helped me, but I'm not going to presume it's going to be, this isn't prescriptive. This isn't how to deconstruct. I did not want to write a manual for how to deconstruct, because I wouldn't even know how you would do that. Everybody's journey is unique. I didn't want to write a manual for what it means to be a progressive Christian, because that's just diverse by virtue of the values of progressivism. What I wanted to do was just help people in this journey, kind of just give them a hug. Yeah. And let them know I'm with you.
And I think I'm glad you said that. This is not a manual on how to deconstruct, because that's everything from mysterious, as you and I were talking early. It's not like you wake up one morning and decide to deconstruct. This is something that happens. But talk a little more. A moment ago, you mentioned the word permission. And I think this is an idea that isn't talked about enough, or this feeling, this collide with this lack of permission we don't give ourselves. Could you talk a little more about that experience?
Sure.
Of permission?
Yeah. For those of us who have a background in some version of Christian fundamentalism or even just evangelical context, we within a system of expectation around what you could sort of behave and believe. And it was just sort of a top-down hierarchy of here's what it means to be a Christian, which is really what they're really saying is here's what it means to be an evangelical Christian. And they've just decided that they've sort of got the monopoly on it, which I don't even mean to other them that much, because I think we all can find ourselves, like all sort of major branches of Christianity, I imagine, would think theirs is the best. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't be in it anymore. But there's this expectation of here's what you believe and here's how you behave. And if you violate either of these, then you are outside the flock. We'll take away your credentials as an evangelical. And so but it goes even deeper than that, David, because it's not just you're outside of the fold, it's your very status with God is in jeopardy if you cease to believe these things or cease to behave within these parameters. And this is the thing that I, if something's going to get me worked up and fired up, it's going to be the insistence that what God cares most, what the creator of everything cares most about is what you and I think. Like, think about that for a minute. We have somehow decided that the thing that matters most to God are ideas, are beliefs that we hold. I'm a father of 4 children, and I can't remember one time as a dad thinking, you know what matters most to me? You know what I care most about is that my sons have the right ideas about me, and that they have the right beliefs, and that they can answer the right question about my vocation and what I think is important. Like, just beliefs and ideas. I'm not saying they're irrelevant. Obviously, beliefs contribute to how we act in the world. But this idea that what God cares most about is our beliefs, I think is fundamentally flawed in all sorts of ways. And I think Jesus backs me up on this through all of his teachings and all of the way that he lived his life. So back to your permission question, one of the stories I love most in the Gospels is when Jesus is sort of having this, I see it as a very real human check-in moment with the people that knew him best, where might even say Jesus was having some sort of identity crisis, like, who am I? And so he turns to his friends, he's like, hey, who do people say that I am? And they're like, some people say you're Elijah come back from the dead, you're John the Baptist come back from the dead. Basically, people think you are a dead prophet who's come back to life. Okay. Jesus says, well, what about you guys? Who do you say that I am? Like, I don't know about you, David, but I have often needed to check in with the people closest to me to like reflect back to me, myself, so that I can understand me better. And I often wonder if that's what Jesus was doing a bit. And Peter says to him, I think you're the Messiah. I think you're the Christ. Which is a shorthand way of saying, I think you are the long-awaited prophet that we have been anticipating for centuries, the one who's going to liberate us and set us free from a Roman oppression. I think that's you. I think you might actually be the one. And Jesus' response, and this is to answer your question about permission, Jesus' response was, blessed are you, Simon, for no one has told you this. But you have, and here's my interpretation of it, but you have discerned it to be true through God who is within you. Jesus said, my Father in heaven revealed it to you, but there's really in my mind, there's no difference between the Father revealing it from heaven versus us intuiting it from, like, they're one and the same is the point. Sure. There's nobody believes that God was like, hey, Peter, hey, I got something to tell you. Like, no, it happened from the inside out, right? Blessed are you, Simon, for knowing. It's almost as though Jesus was privileging this idea of us hearing the voice of truth from within and having permission to trust that can be true. Mm. So within the evangelical world, you don't get to listen to the inner voice. You don't get to discern that God might be speaking to you from within. Certainly not if it has anything that might be deemed as contrary to the evangelical set of behaviors and beliefs. So for me, giving permission to people is permission to say, you know what, maybe you know the answer deep within. Maybe you do. Maybe you can sit and listen and trust, and stop letting that verse that the heart is deceitful and wicked stop letting that be this oppressive voice that says you can't ever trust your feelings or your voice. Sure, some of your feelings can't be trusted, 100%. Yeah, some of the things that you might think are totally wonky, yeah, that's true. And some of what you might know deep in your soul to be true is true. That's and right. Is good, and it's okay to listen to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is good. No, learning to trust that inner voice, right? And especially in conservative realms, we were always told that side of us is bad.
That's right.
But I think you're right. When that awoken in my experience, and then just talking to others, right? When you can begin to go, no, that inner voice is actually true. Versus this other truth. Here, one of the things we'll say here at Sparrow Day is what's true is better than truth. True is better than truth. And so, no, I think, yeah, and we need that permission, right? It's just because it hasn't been ingrained in us. Colby, this starts with, you're not just some pastor sitting in a study, talking about the theology or even someone else's experience of a faith shift, a faith evolvement. You went through it yourself, and it's something that happened to you. You experienced all the disorder, all the fear, all the loss. So I think I want to ask you 3 kind of questions about that. When you were full on in the mess of that, and by the way, Colby, I'll add this at least to my wonderment. It's not like this is then said and done. In 10 years, we might go through another shift of.
I'm assuming so. Yes.
But in the context of this, when you were in the full throes of that, what was most important to you? During that time? 2, what hurt you the most? What was hurtful the most? And then I guess the third one would be, how then have you reordered this whole, where Rohr talks about, uses the 3 words of order, then the order falls apart into disorder, but we can't live in disorder forever. Then there has to be this remaking, this reorder. So what was the most important to you? What hurt and broke your heart? Oh, here's my third question. No, what would you, and we can't, what do you wish you could have done differently in that?
Yeah. A number of years ago, after I had just been fired from my second church in 2 years, I'm really good at that, David. So I think that's why I had to start my own church. But even then, I'm not inoculated. Someday they might be coming for me.
Yeah.
I was sitting with the spiritual director, and he was walking me through this exercise of mapping out, looking back on my life and thinking about some of the major turning points and the major pivot moments. And at one point, he sort of leaned back in his seat at the coffee shop, and he goes, it looks to me like integrity is really important to you. And I thought he just meant at the time, like, sort of the common vernacular usage of integrity, like just making sure that that you're a good person who does good things in secret as well as in public, that sort of thing. And he said, no, I don't mean integrity in that way. I mean integrity in terms of integrated, being aligned. Alignment seems really important to you. And he pointed out how at various points in my life, when I was out of alignment, that was oftentimes the most painful seasons for me. And so to answer your question, what was most important going through this was finding that alignment, finding whatever the outcome was. So for me, and I referenced it a minute ago, for me, I was in a context where externally I was a worship and arts pastor at a large evangelical megachurch, and things were going well, and I sort of had to fall in line with this evangelical setup. But internally, I had shifted quite a ways from from the Baptist theology that I had been trained in. And it was starting to take its toll on me. So I had to, what was important to me was getting my internal world, my external world aligned, regardless of what that might mean for my life, regardless of what that might mean for my paycheck, for my vocation, for my relationships. I knew that I wasn't going to last as a human continuing to be disintegrated, continuing to be that far out of alignment from what I believe is a biblical definition, if I can be so bold as to use that word that I don't use very often. But the Greek word sozo, as I'm sure you know, David, is most often translated as salvation in the New Testament. Sure, salvation is a fine way to translate sozo. It's not the only, and it might have so much baggage at this point that it might not be the best way to think of sozo. Sozo can also mean whole or complete. And I was so far from feeling whole or complete. Yeah. So what was most important to me was getting integrated at all costs. Is to make sure that my internal world and my external world were lined up no matter the cost.
Colby, let me ask something about that, though.
Yeah.
Which I totally agree. Is that something you can muster? Is that something you can try at? Because I remember and you do so well in Clobber, in Unclobber, you lay out well you talk about the misalignment, and you talk about that well. As I was going through that, my word for it when I was going through this, and it was with my therapist saying, David, you're living incongruent.
Yeah.
So, which I agreed with, going, I've got to get this alignment. I've got to get this congruency together. But is that something that is there a patient process in that? Can we hop on one foot and twirl around and suddenly make that happen? Talk about that. Because I agree with you, but then there's the journey there, right?
Yes, it is such a great question. Is that something that we can sort of strap on our boots and make happen? And I'll respond to a couple of things that come up right away. First is, I would say most of the time, no. Most of the time, I think what helps people move along towards alignment and finding wholeness is something externally collapsing upon them and sort of forcing their hand to find alignment. In the recovery world, they talk about hitting rock bottom. Sometimes you got to hit rock bottom so that you can start putting life back together again.
Yes. And is the bottom yet? Have you?
I know, right? Yeah. So I think that for many, many people, it's almost like, you're going to need some inciting incident to happen to kind of give you the freedom, the space, the possibility. Maybe you have to get fired so that you're no longer paid for what you believe, so that you can practice a new way of believing. But here's why I hesitate as that being my only answer, because I think that is only a product of a climate which asks of people to buy into specific beliefs and behaviors at all costs. This requirement creates a environment of fear and shame. If people were able to reach inside and grab those parts of them that weren't matched up and externalize them and say, this is currently something I'm thinking and feeling. Can we talk about this? If that can be done, you could do it in a therapist's office because you're paying the therapist to not judge you. This is part of why therapy works, is because we can externalize all the things and we receive loving kindness. We receive non-judgmental. This is part of why it helps the healing process. But we can't, for the most part, do that in many religious contexts because of the fear and the shame of being kicked out if you don't belong, or being made to feel like you're stupid or doing it wrong. or like, oh, I'm concerned about you, which is a veiled way of saying, I think you're going to hell. And I don't know how else to tell you of that. It doesn't have to be that way. So that's my point, I guess, is I think for most people, it's probably not something we can just bootstrap, because we have been so developed in a culture where the fear and the shame is so heavy that the amount of will that it would take to push through that is almost asking more of what people are capable of doing, which is why sometimes we have these external chaotic events happen that after the fact we can be like, I'm so glad that happened. I'm so glad that my world fell apart and that it happened almost just, and I was a victim of it. Like what a act of grace that was, because I don't know, I might have just tried to keep pushing through in this out of alignment phase for even longer and would have done more and more damage. So I don't know.
So, Colby, what, when you were in your shift, your evolution, your disorientation, what hurt the most? What was the most hurtful?
I think two things on that. I've always prided myself in being smart and well-read and logical and reasonable. And in the evangelical world, that was well received and people really appreciated that. Then when I was shifting away from that world, it hurt the number of times that people, I guess, and it really probably just hurts my pride more than anything else. I'd like to think that the next time around, or if this happens again, it really, like, it won't hurt as bad. But back then it hurt that people thought that I hadn't done my research, that I just hadn't read this Bible verse, or that I wasn't moving away from some of these beliefs that I'd held for so long as a result of diving further into the Bible, which is, I'm sure you can relate, super frustrating when people think that, that if you take, for me, if I take the Bible more seriously, if I dig, the deeper I dug into it, the more that I sort of found the really, the limitations and the smallness of a lot of sort of my old thoughts and beliefs. And so that really hurt. That sort of hurt my intellectual pride of like, come on, like I know this stuff. I know that verse, and it's just, it doesn't say what you think. Anyway, so that hurt. But then I think the where it got me in the heart was in a similar way, but people were thinking that I was abandoning my love of Jesus, or turning my back on God, or just wanting to fit in with culture more. And so then that was like calling into direct question my character, my sense of my perception of who I am, which is a relatively good guy who tries to do his best. And now you're sort of the sense that I'm not that. So that hurt. I guess that hurt is for people to question my character and question my commitment to pursuing, I don't know, what felt most good and true and right. Mm-hmm. So, like I said, as I say it out loud, I'm like, oh, what a sweet little Colby who was hurt by those things. Whereas now I'd like to think more, it's fine if you don't understand me or you think I'm like, but back then that did hurt.
No, I relate. It's always, the deepest hurt is always relational, isn't it? And as the people we love collides with the essence of who we are, especially if the essence of who we are, the trueness of who we are is awakening, like we're experiencing birth and rebirth, and someone who loves you is saying that must all be counterfeit.
Yeah.
It's devastating. And, I won't go into this deep now, but like my wife and I went through this at different stages. So it affected our marriage had to weather this.
Yeah.
I'm sure as being a pastor, you've talked to, it's happening on one side of one spouse is experiencing it, but the other spouse isn't experiencing it. The father-in-law is a conservative pastor, and the son-in-law is deconstructing, and the spouse feels that, right? Or the rejection of family, or saying strong things like unbiblical or apostate, right?
Yeah.
Those things are devastating. Colby, would you, and we can't, but we do have people listening to us who are going through it. Would you have done some things differently? Or could you even have done things? I don't know if I could, but.
Yeah, it's so hard to think that way, isn't it? Because I'm so grateful for where I am now.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I would be where I am now had I not done some stupid things along the way, and had not other people's pain been spilled out upon me, in different ways. I think what I would have done differently is maybe just started therapy sooner. So there's one answer. So I'm envious when I hear you talk about how you were a pastor going through some of this and you went to therapy. I'm like, man, I don't know if you told anybody you were doing that, but I sure wish I would have saw the value in doing therapy sooner. So I guess maybe that's my answer, is I wish I would have sought a better understanding of me, which I know all the good evangelicals think that is a sin, that you should try to understand God more, and trying to do the navel gazing. I get it. But we have to also kind of know who we are, where we came from. We have to know our own why. Why am I the way I am? What systems did I come out of? What baggage did my parents subconsciously pass on to me? What oppressive ideas did I pick up along the way? We have to understand why we became who we were, especially in our line of work, David. Otherwise, we're not going to be a lick of good to anybody, helping them understand who they are. So I guess my regret is that I didn't do that sort of self-exploration journey a lot sooner, which would have included therapy, which would have included tools like the Enneagram. I'm a big fan of the way the Enneagram helps us understand ourselves and each other. But yeah, in terms of what I wish I would have asked those questions sooner, or done that move later, or I don't know. Those are like, I can see how all of them had value. I do wish that my own personal movement to become an open and affirming pastor would have happened sooner.
Yeah.
So I think I know that a lot of people who are in sort of this Christian shifting space and might internally be affirming of their queer brothers, sisters, and siblings have not yet done so publicly. And I haven't met one person yet who has made that shift and has said, yeah, I wish I would have waited longer. No, everybody to a T is like, yeah, I wish I would have done that sooner.
Yeah.
So that part's true.
Yeah.
That part's true.
Yeah, I relate. Yeah, wish I reached out to my LGBTQ brothers and sisters long time ago. Well, can I ask you some quick one-offs that I made separate?
Sounds good.
As
you can tell, I'm really good at quick answers.
No,
my life motto, David, is why use 10 words when 50 will do. So I just
are you a 7? What are you?
I'm a 3. I'm a type 3.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, let me ask you some one-offs, and then maybe some more soundbitey things. But expound how you wish. So, Colby, as I said, you were, especially you were one of the early pastors. A lot of the guys you and I read, and women that we read, had either left, they may have been in pastoral roles, but they had left. And so I do think you need prophets. You do need gurus, people that go through the wall on fire, no doubt. they help give us permission. But then there's those of us, the men and women, who still then are going to pastor these progressive communities. So I guess my question to you, especially as you're still doing it, you were one of the forerunners in it. Where do you think it's all headed? Where do you think this evolving Christianity, where do you think it's all headed?
I have no idea, which I know you know that. I know you know that I really don't know. So I know you're asking, okay, after that, after you can assume that you don't know where it's going, do you still have any thoughts on that? But I do always start with my general disinterest in the world of future prognosticating. Like I just have no idea, and I spend very little time thinking or being worried about it. But I'll say this: I'm increasingly concerned for American society, and increasingly concerned that we are further and further siloing ourselves and isolating ourselves into our corners with our own news outlets, with our own personalities, with our own versions of what is true, with our own facts, and more so unable to talk to people on the other side, and even more so unable to listen. So that's got me real concerned. And that has an obvious overlaying effect into the world of church. So whereas I would like to say, oh, I think that churches will go down this trajectory, the moral arc of the universe bends towards justice. I feel like the church will sort of move towards this more inclusive, expansive view of the kingdom of God. There's a part of me that's like, if our society at large can't figure that out, I don't know that the churches are going to figure it out either. I think churches might be also moving into these more and more siloed versions. Mm-hmm. And I don't love that. And I think, so my wife and I started our church just over 7 years ago. And within that time, I know a good number of churches that have started and then closed within this progressive Christian church space, because it is really freaking hard, for all sorts of reasons. And I think we need, I don't know, man. I think we need leaders who are not willing to weather the storm. That's not fair. You know how in the recovery community, or at least I have tangential awareness, in the recovery community, the model is, as I understand it, as you're working the program and working the steps, once you get a little bit down the road, you turn around and you just help those who are just a little bit behind you. You don't ever like graduate out and then like, okay, cool, I'm recovered, I'm good to go, I wish the best for all. No, you stay in the okay. So I feel like
you work the program.
You work the program, and you're always sort of helping the people who are just a little bit behind you.
Yes.
I feel like within our progressive Christian movements, and there are a plurality of them, I feel like we need to embrace that model, because so many people come through churches like ours and they receive much needed liberation from really crappy theology. They receive permission to think and believe whatever they want because it doesn't actually affect their status as a loved child of God. And they get messages like, you know what? You don't actually have to go to church. Did you know that? You don't have to. You really don't, and you're going to be okay. And eventually they start to like take you up on that. Like, oh, okay, I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for the year of safe landing place that you provided for me. I think I'm out. And I don't begrudge that. I think that's totally fine. And if everybody does that, then we're going to have no churches left. Yeah. That are going to be open to hold. We're just going to have people that are continually launching out of these conservative, because that's going to keep happening. People are going to keep leaving the evangelical church world, and they need soft landing places. So I think the communities like ours, David, need people who are willing to say, you know what? I actually am good now. I'm good. I know that I don't need to go to church, but I want to stick around and invest in this community to ensure that those who are behind me will have the same chance at healing and wholeness that I did. That's what we need. So if the progressive church is gonna have any hope for the future, we need people who have found that liberation and that freedom, and then see the value in making sure that other people get to have that same experience. Not just being like, I'm good, I'm out. I don't want to go to church anymore. I'm kind of over the whole thing. Totally, I get it. Sometimes I'm over the whole thing too. But there's too many people that need spaces like Sparrow and Sojourn. So stick around, invest, show up.
Yeah, and I think to your point, your point at the top of this question, I agree too. Tribalism is alive and well, isn't it? And one of the concerns I even have with our evolving movement is that we then get tribal. We just switch one form of tribalism for another. So I share that same concern. And to your latter point that you eloquently just, the relational aspect of it, I think what I still hold to is the essence of the human heart, even the spiritual heart, is to attach relationally. That one of the things we have to leave is that our faith is, now we have a new series of ideas. And so you've enlightened me with new ideas, so I'm good. Or you freed me from my old ideas.
Yeah.
Thank you. No, I still think the human psychology is the deep spirituality of it, which is we thrive by attaching to each other. And when I think of Christ's command, I hear that in attachment sense. So Jesus, what's the most important thing when it comes to life, God, spirituality? And he goes, it's about being attached, you to have a deep attachment through love with the God who cares about you. It's having a deep attachment to other people. This is the essence of who we are. And it's having a deep attachment to yourself.
Yeah.
Now, I realize people go, well, I have that, David. I don't need Sparrow Day or Sojourns. And to your point and mine, we not only do we not begrudge them, we go, well, we can't disagree, especially if the communities you found are much safer than this spiritual one or this religious one. But man, if we can create this continued sense of what we attach to, which is God and each other, then I hope we have a shot, unless we get reverse fundamentalist, unless we get reverse tribalistic, then we just offer the same shallow version, another dogma, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yes, you too. Here's another one.
Yeah, because I was so quick with the last one.
No, you were great. Colby, the role of the Bible and our evolving, shifting, progressive faith. Where do you think we're headed with the Bible? What do you think the role of the Bible will be, or what do you think the role of the Bible needs to be?
I think the Bible's a freaking miraculous document. I mean, it has transcended so many cultures and times in history. I mean, it's really is a miracle that we have it.
Yes.
It's gone through a lot. And so
I think have it, right?
Yes. And so I think there's really, I think it's fine. It'll be fine. It can withstand all of our scrutiny. It can withstand all of our questions. It can withstand all of our doubts. It can withstand all of the seasons of our lives where we want nothing to do with it. It's fine. The Bible's going to be fine. I would encourage people to relax a little bit around the Bible and not be so tightly wound with thinking that it is this lightning rod of perfection that if you dare try to bend it or push it or ask any questions of it, then the whole thing will combust on you. No, it's fine. You're fine. It has been poked and prodded for millennia, and it is fine. It has been understood differently and interpreted differently and practiced differently by those who all fall within the umbrella of Christianity for a really long time. There is not one, contrary to conversations that you and I probably have with people, there is not one way to understand the Bible that has like just this stream, this straight line from like Jesus to us today, this unbroken way. No, just hard pass on that thinking. Go back to any of the early church fathers, and just within decades of the early church movement, you have disagreements on how to understand things. All of that has been part of it. It all belongs. It's all fine. So I love it. The Bible's a miraculous document. I find it to be endlessly fascinating that it exists, that it has transcended all this time, and that it contains this wealth of wisdom and insight into humans who have wrestled with some of life's most pressing deep questions. Why are we here? Where did this all come from? What is the point of life? We have a pretty cool library of some really good answers to that in the Bible. We have people really intuiting and discerning and learning and discovering what it means to be a human and who God is and who God is in relation to us and how we relate to others. I think the Bible is almost unmatched in its wisdom in that way. So I love the Bible.
Is it? And go ahead.
I was going to say, and I think it makes a whole lot of sense that a lot of people want nothing to do with the Bible, because the Bible has been used as this oppressive tool of control and power and manipulation and shame. And when you have been at the receiving end of that sort of harm, I'm not going to ask you to go back to it. I'm going to be like, oh, I know this thing wounded you for 4 decades of your life by making you feel like just who you were is an abomination. But now that I've done a bit of jujitsu with the Hebrew, like you see that it's not actually who says what it says. So you're good now, right? Right? You're good? Like, no, probably not. And maybe never. And I just say, yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense.
And you probably already answered this, but as someone goes through their process, is it okay to set it down?
Yeah, it's not just okay. It's like there are times where I have pastorally advised people, stop reading your Bible.
Yeah.
Stop reading your Bible because your body needs time to heal from these messages. Your brain needs time to a space to allow words to be said and not be immediately triggered into, like, I remember a couple of years ago, I gave a sermon about grace, and there was a gal afterwards who emailed me and said, I loved that sermon, but every time you just said the word grace, it just, like my heart rate just jumped because that word had been so used to tell me like what I was supposed to do in my marriage. You just got to give grace, that now whenever I hear that, I just think, oh, some other religious person is telling me I have to endlessly allow myself to be this punching bag, and that's grace. Yeah, that totally, like, your body, your brain needs time to heal from many of these messages, and your spirituality may be improved by walking away from the Bible.
Mm, well said, Colby. Yes, yes, yes. Well, I want to end talking about your other wonderful book, Unclobber. And we probably should do a whole segment on this at some point. But Colby, you wrote this book, Unclobber, talking about what we know in our pastoral ministerial work, the 6 clobber verses. And I love how in this book, in your even chapters, you deal with the theology of it, and in your odd chapters, you deal with the story of it. what would you say? What do you, as this whole shift is happening, this whole evolution in 21st century Christianity is happening, what do you want our LGBTQ brothers and sisters to know? What do you want them to know, embrace, hold on to, let go of?
I hope they can hear me when I say how sorry I am. I hope you hear me when I invite you, if you would like to hear what I'm saying, which is I'm sorry. It's not fair. It's not fair that you were given these messages. It's not fair that you were told this right alongside the moments in your life when you were told things that are true about the world, like 2 + 2 = 4, and the earth rotates around the sun. All these things that you were told is true. Your brain also was told that it's true that gay people are sinners, or that to be in a relationship with someone of the same sex is an abomination. And your sweet little brain would have no way of knowing to hold these two truths differently. It just all got bundled together in this one category of this one box in your brain titled things that are true. And so now you might be 16, you might be 30, you might be 57 years old, and you're still trying to disentangle those early messages. And of course you are, because those were given to you at a young age. And I'm sorry that our religion has so focused on this and has decided that it is the thing that decides whether people are saved or not. I'm so sorry that it's become this hyper focused issue where you've been layered with shame and guilt in ways that you just did not deserve. And I'm sorry. It wasn't okay. It's not okay. You are loved. You are loved just as you are, by me, by David, and I believe there's not the list of things that I stake my flag in the ground and say I believe this about God to be 100% true. That list has grown shorter over the years. But one flag that I will never take out of the ground is I believe that God loves you. You are God's child, just as you are. And I'm sorry that you were ever told anything different.
Well, Colby, thanks for this time. And man, I appreciate the heart and the words you shared. And I can't recommend this book enough.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think anybody going through any kind of faith disorientation, a shift in their faith, anybody that needs permission, anybody that needs to know they're not alone and to be given permission and to know that you're going to be okay. This book is a wonderful book. So thanks for writing it. And like I said, I wish you wrote it 10 years ago, but I know you had to live it. I know you had to live it first, but thanks for spending time with Sparrow Day. And thank you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, David. It's been a pleasure.